Welcome to C3 Church Global's podcast, wherever you might be listening or watching from. Thanks for tuning in. Our hope is that this podcast is of great encouragement and equips and empowers you for leading healthy, growing, and multiplying churches. My name is Ben Giles, General Manager and Leadership Development Pastor for C3 Church Global, and it's my absolute pleasure to be chatting with Ps Rock Mutegheki, all things entrepreneurial training, as well as really the catalyst or genesis for this program, Pat Ancliff, who's part of the SYD leadership staff, as well as one of our execs on our global executive team. Well, both of you are. Welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Great to be talking this subject.
Thank you, sir.
That's really good. Pastor Rock and his wife Deborah are the senior pastors of C3 Alive, and it's 4 campuses in Kampala, Uganda. They're also C3 East West Africa regional directors, and are a big part of our C3 Church Global exec team and are prolific church planters. So it's great to have you here, Rock, and I'm just so glad that we get a chance to catch up face to face.
That's a good intro, Ben.
I'm trying to drum you up as best as I can, mate. So, but good to see you in person. We often catch up via Zoom, but you're here in person. We've taken the opportunity to just chat entrepreneurial training. This is, I think, what a great opportunity to potentially roll this out further than what we're currently doing. But Pat, why don't you give us a bit of an introduction as to what the catalyst was for starting this program to begin with, when you were in fact in the hot seat in East West Africa as the regional director yourself?
Yeah, back in the day before Rock took it further than I could ever take it anywhere, yeah. Well, I think often the genesis of things is in lots of frustration and pain. And it just became very apparent over time that if you are going to make disciples in a place like East Africa, if you are going to empower leaders, that it has to be holistic in the way that you do that, and must include economic development, and it must include discipleship in how to create and utilize wealth. My wife Amanda and I and the team, we really started by tackling mindsets. And so we spent probably a few years in looking at how the Bible really sets up a disciple for not just being provided for miraculously. Mm-hmm. I think that's often the mindset, isn't it, Rock?
Yes, yeah.
That if you're blessed, then somebody provides miraculously for you, like in the wilderness experience. You know, the Israelites are wandering around and God provides manna. But there's another step where you can work and God blesses your work. And it's a very empowering step. So we had to tackle that first, because if we didn't get the theology right and didn't help people with mindsets, then there'd be no point in laying out entrepreneur training for people, because they wouldn't participate. Indeed, there was some theology that the promised land was a place where you didn't work.
Right. Okay. So tell me, how did you tackle this? Like, what were you basing that on as a really foundational level for somebody who might be listening, thinking, well, I don't really subscribe to that mindset?
We based it on the story of the Israelites in Egypt. So when they were in Egypt, they were slaves.
Right.
They did not own any assets. They had no income. They were someone else's assets, and they did not have freedom in the way they were able to generate income and support themselves. Right. The next step was a beautiful step. They were taken out of slavery into the wilderness, and it was the land of provision. And it was miraculous. You know, God provided quail and manna, and their shoes didn't wear out. And, you know, how good's that?
Yeah, sounds sensational.
So very sensational. However, all of the provision was just enough for their own needs.
Right.
It wasn't more than enough to be a blessing to others.
Right.
Whereas when they went into the promised land, it was the time to plant their crops, to mine the ore, and it was work, and it was hard work, but as they were blessed, they prospered. It was so prosperous that it became proverbial, the prosperous experience of the nation of Israel. And so we looked at that as a way of describing our journey in God, where we can be in a place where, you know, really with resources we don't have enough. Mm-hmm. And that's not a good place for anyone.
Yeah.
And how, as we learn to trust God and to step out in Him, we can experience His provision, and that's a beautiful thing.
Right.
But that we can also go a step further.
Yeah, great.
And that step further is, how can I get the knowledge and skills to create income? Yeah. how can I create income so it's not just for my own family's needs, but more than enough so that I can be generous on every occasion? And so that was the framework.
And so how long do you on average, obviously it's going to be different for every individual, but for most people to kind of come on that journey from having that mindset of, well, this is not really what I believe, and into adopting some of these mindsets and principles that you're talking about?
It varied, didn't it, Rock? It would be, some people would be, you do that one teaching and they just go, got it.
Just go for it. It depends on the person, how hungry they are and how ready they are. So actually that teaching that Pat and Amanda did, the 3 financial lands, has become like our core teaching to start off this, wherever we started. Because the problem of these areas is poverty. And a poor person can't set themselves free from poverty, right, because he's bound. So you don't tell a bound person to unbind yourself. That's not possible. Someone has to do it. And it starts with teaching. So, of course, the parable of the sower, they are different grounds. Yeah. So it depends on how receptive the person is and how ready the person is. My own situation was different. In one of these intensives, we called them trainings in Nobview. We brought, Pat asked this gentleman who is a good financial mentor in our city, and he did a very wonderful session. And I was part of that. At the end, I asked him for a one-on-one. I thought we were going to sit for 30 minutes, but we actually did 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, he had finished everything.
Right.
So he was showing me how to save. It was hard for me to save, literally. Mm-hmm. And then he helped me with this principle of, if tithe, 10% is holy unto the Lord, why is it hard for you to know that at least 10% is holy unto you? So he helped me to save in this simple way. And boom, I got it. I just got it.
And how long ago was that for you?
It still works up to now. I'm still going with it.
when was this meeting with this gentleman? And how long, Pat, since you've started in this program?
The program started in May 2016.
Yeah, I was going to say probably a bit under 10 years, but yeah, you're closer to it.
Yes, May 2016. That's actually when it started. So we've been doing it. This is the 7th year.
So it was probably 2 years of really just dealing with mindsets.
Right.
Before we got to the point of saying, okay, let's start training people on how to handle money, how to create income, how to be an entrepreneur, and that whole next step of the practical equipping and mentoring. And for those who really listened and applied it, some seed capital to start their own business.
Fantastic. And who was the audience for this first genesis of this program?
The audience was always the church and then spreading out to the community.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was the impact that you saw amongst first the church, but also the wider community?
The impact has been massive. Of course, there are different levels of training. There are those who come for the first one, and then they get tired, they don't want to come back again. Then there are those who come for the second one, and then there are those who continue to the mentorship program. But the impact has been that we've had over 2,000 entrepreneurs trained, which is amazing.
That is incredible.
We've seen around 298 small businesses started.
298?
Yes.
Sensational.
So, it's pretty good. But I think it's fair to say that the first impact, we were teaching pastors, and some did not want to hear any more.
Right.
Because it sounded like too slow, too small a return, too much hard work, and they couldn't see the long-term empowerment and the multiplication. Like, this is explosive. But they were just looking at you mean can't I just meet someone who's going to give me money?
Yeah, I'm excited about the potential of this opportunity. I think that not just in expanding what you're doing in Uganda, but in other regions as well too. But before we drive into that, I'd like to hear a little bit more about how personally it's impacted you, Rock, and your wife, Deborah, and your family.
For myself, really the training helped me to save. It was very hard for me to save. And it's not only me. I remember because Pat is also my personal mentor and overseer. I don't know whether he remembers, but
put me to the test.
One time we were talking about a budget, and he said, "Rock, do you have a budget? Can I see your budget?" And in my mind, I'm like, "Pat, do you know what I go through? I mean, how do you even tell me to?" Because I was scared of a budget, and there are many like that. So he said, "Well, you can do it. Simple." So I took it. I'm an accountant by profession, but I couldn't do a budget.
Right. Wow.
So, but through the theology and the parenting and the mentorship, I think that breaks it down, and that is accepted. So for me, it was, how do I save small? Because I used to think that saving means a lot of saving at once if I want to build a house. So this gentleman who had come to train us helped me how to save. And it was very simple, Ben. It was more like, okay, Rock, let's begin with simple saving. So he was like, do you take lunch? I said, yes. We calculated out my lunch money. And at the end of it all, he told me, you've been eating your first house for the last 5 years in lunch.
Wow.
So he said, I want you to take off that lunch and maybe come to work with a lunch box.
Right.
And save up that money for lunch, just lunch,
right,
and you will see the impact. So I did savings. At the end of the year, I had enough money to start the foundation for our first house.
That's amazing.
So
Great story.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Mind change, mindset change.
Right.
So it's like a paradigm shift. For some people, it's going to be a journey. For others, it takes a short time.
And you're still using those principles today?
Yes.
Like that hasn't escaped
They're
you, right?
working.
Right.
I mean, I have a budget.
You've still got a budget.
There's a budget, there's savings.
That's good. It's good that's had longevity to
and
budget.
in the West, that sounds like, because everyone has shopping list. In most of these nations, that's a big deal. Why? Because already the need is overwhelming. The income is less, the expenditure is so high. So you don't want to focus on the expenditure. You just want to meet it as it comes. Budgets become ghosts. They're like demons. So you just walk this life by faith. So you need someone to help you understand it so you face reality. And that works for us.
Now, having seen impact both personally and within your community, what's next? What do you see as the opportunity for Uganda as a starting point?
Not only for Uganda, I look at this as a global initiative, not just a regional initiative. Pat helped us launch that in our country. We would love to expand that to other countries, but also to all these other areas where we have churches. We need to answer the question. Now, the old-time missionaries would come to these places with schools and hospitals, but there's always a problem of sustenance. Right. You can start a school, but if it's not self-supporting, it's the same thing. They will still come back to you to pay the teachers. They will come back to you to do this. And it becomes more of a handout. Right. So the entrepreneurial program is a hand up. It takes long, but really if we are going to invest in these areas and listen to their cry, because Ben, you have to know the plight of a poor person. Like, if I don't have food on the table, and you have food on the table, and you ask us to relate, it is very impossible for me not to think that you will give me something. Actually, to them, if you say, you people, you're beggars, it's an offense. Because even if it was you, and you don't have food on the plate, you would still have to beg. Now, the problem that many people do is, the challenge is, they go and tell the guy without food, and they teach him all these principles, and they say God will set you free. And they don't show them how. They don't train them. They don't walk the journey with them. So what we are advocating for and what we want to multiply is, as a global family, as a global movement, we are in developing countries, how do we help these people in developing countries not to be dependent?
Yeah, right.
So rather than us going there and telling them, we will build your church, we will buy for you church land, we will build for you a house, why not help transform their mind so they believe in the three financial lands, like we said, but also they believe they have that entrepreneurial mindset. And then we don't just leave them there, we help them start, supervise them, but also start savings schemes in these churches. And then after some time, there will be fruit.
Yeah, I think this has such a compounding effect, really, for a global movement such as ourselves, the opportunity not just to create sustainable local churches, but to also relieve some of the pressure off the movement as a whole, who might be at the moment assisting directly some of those churches, which obviously we want to do, and we want to lift them up and we want to encourage them, but to really empower them and to equip them to run sustainable churches, I feel is really the end point, or the game that we're looking towards having. Because if we can't do that, if the funds do dry up, and let's hope they don't, but if they were to do that, we don't want people feeling like they're completely left alone or unable to continue. And that's the important thing. Right?
It's quite astounding when you see just the multiplication effect of this. You see an individual who is empowered to be able to be a blessing to others. Now, honestly, the impact of that story, when we ask people to tell that story sometimes, don't we? And we've heard the stories of salons being started, the concrete seller, the guy with the goat farm. We've got all these stories. But you just see in the telling of this story the dignity that has been given to someone. It's just extraordinary. And then you see that they're not just thinking about, well, this is a blessing to my family. They're thinking about being generous.
Yeah, right.
So a part of teaching in this way is it's about stewardship.
Yes. Right.
And so then you see the churches that they're members of not having to say, well, God, I'll be blessed if you send me someone from overseas, but they're able to bring this positive light of Christ impact in their community, and it's being raised locally.
Right, right.
So it's quite extraordinary. One of our churches in the north, C3 Kitgum Mutegheki, run by Pastor Vincent and Pasca. I remember turning up there some years ago and I saw all these houses built on the side of the land. I said, oh, what are these houses, Vincent? And he said, oh, we built them for the widows in our community. I said, oh, who helped you do that? And he said, well, God blessed our farming. And then we walked a little bit further and I saw a generator outside and it was all of this musical gear inside. And I go, oh, Vincent, how'd you get this? And he goes, well, God blessed our farming.
So good.
And so that is like a big picture. It's transformative people, but it's transformative of communities.
Absolutely. And sustainable local churches create sustainable local communities. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is that we get to witness the mercy and the love and the grace of God and the provision of God into those communities through the local community themselves, rather than expecting that some external person is going to come in and save them from whatever it might be that they're looking for that handout for. That's awesome. And I think that this is a really exciting opportunity that we've got going forward. So how can people get involved?
Well, I think you'll be blessed if you are involved in this, because there's nothing quite as impacting as when you see a life transformed. I think that people who would assist with the training and the teaching, that would have a passion for this, particularly if you've got a love of business and seeing people do well in business, that would be a great outcome. Funding of the teaching and training materials. We need to get that into the hands of people and to make sure that it is quality stuff that will help them to really learn well.
Right.
And then I do this third one a bit, and I'm about to do it again with another person that I know in Uganda. Yes. And that is, I just love providing seed capital for people's entrepreneurial idea.
Right.
And then being a part of their story as their family has changed and seeing them flourish. So those three areas.
And Rock, just give me a sort of a quantum, because people might be listening. How do we set up, if we are talking about seed capital, how do we set up people for success, say in the Ugandan context at least to begin with? And obviously there's different nations and different contexts that we're looking to provide this for, but what does that look like for you? What kind of amount are we talking?
You're talking about, depending, you assess someone's business idea. So it all starts with the training. And it's those who do well in the training that qualify for seed capital. Now, the training doesn't only go to those who are starting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It also goes to those who are doing a business and they want to thrive. Right. So those ones don't actually get seed capital. But there are these people who are diligent and they have been coming to the training and they are showing that they have something. So they are not bringing an idea on the table. You are simply saying, what do you have? Do you have any tools? If you're going to buy goats, let me say you're buying 5 goats using the seed capital. Right. Are you able to construct a small house for the goats? How will you feed the goats? So they are putting something on the table and then you are giving them a hand up. Yeah. So it depends. The smallest you would think about is like maybe $300 US. Right. Yeah. And that can go on depending on the responsibility. Maybe if you're talking about a pastor, you'd be talking 1,000 and above. Yep. Because you're looking at the pastor and his wife and they are in this village. They are starting a business that should sustain them. Because in most of these villages, the church may never pay you for the next 30 years. And that's not hard to understand. Yeah. The point here is this. If you have 200 poor people, you're not going to expect the 200 poor people to pay you. Right. So as you're transforming the pastor, you're also helping to transform the people under him. Right. And in most of these areas, if people see you hungry, if they see you shabby, they never come to your church. Right. You actually attract your kind. Mm. So you don't want to send a weak person who is hungry to plant a church. And of course, the bad models that are in these areas, the man of God kind of man of God who is a chief, grabbing everything from the poor and making himself bigger. That is what, it's a kind of theology that we hit. That's right. And we are telling people you can start small, demonstrate. So on top of that, we start savings and credit cooperative societies. And there's a framework for these in our countries. Actually, the government provides oversight for all these ones. Right. So if it's started at a church, the government will give you all the paperwork, all that you need to open bank accounts. And you can always go to the different organizations and government people to help you supervise the way that is run. You just need to initiate that and then tell the pastor, save, but also encourage people to tithe. Right. Yeah, so it's happening.
Yeah, that's great. I can hear the excitement, that you clearly see for this, this opportunity. And just to reiterate for people listening and watching, that the people who receive seed capital are the ones who make it through that program to the end.
Yes.
They come to you with a business plan. They come with a formed idea. It's not just some sort of ethereal, nice idea, but it actually has legs to it. It's going to grow. It has the possibility of succeeding. So if people do want to come and partner with them to see them flourish, it's not just handed out to anybody who's just had an idea.
And then there are those whom you enhance.
That's it.
Like you give them seed capital, say $1,000, and they really do something amazing. Yeah. And then you add them more, but you use them to resource other people. Yeah. So we've had people who've come up with they buy chicken, maybe they start with 100 or 50 chicken, and they do so well that you tell them, okay, we are going to use you as a demonstration for all the other people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if it's local breed chicken, then you're asking them to say, okay, every season, you're going to be giving out 10 chicken to another family, or you're going to give out 10 goats to another family. And such people, you resource them because they are actually the ones you look to.
Right.
And there are churches which have picked up that. Like our church in Buera, every year, they give out seed capital of $200 to at least 10 people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it's from so they're like, we can support. So it's
really good.
Africa supporting Africa, church supporting church. So as long as you change the mindset and you set the program, and if it is run well and embraced by all the churches and everyone listening to us, we can make a huge difference in these nations.
I love that. I love that. The multiplication effect just keeps on compounding, doesn't it? Well, thank you, Rock. Thank you, Pat, for joining us today. Thanks for your time. If you've been listening or watching, hope you've found that really insightful. And if you do want to get involved, please feel free to contact us at hello@c3churchglobal.com. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks again, Rock and Pat.
Pleasure.
Thanks.